Okay, and probably for the last video slash set of videos, depending on how long this goes, we are going to add Bootstrap to Rails 7. Now, there's a couple of things to talk about before we get into this. If you are an experienced Rails user, this is probably going to be different than you're used to. And the reason why is that there are some new things with Rails 7 that it makes Bootstrap, in theory, a little bit easier. It's actually part of the Rails site creation now, and it includes a lot of extra JavaScript things as well. We're going to need Node.js, we're going to need Yarn, and I will have a set of notes for you of all the little tweaks that I've done to this blog tutorial that you see in front of you, because I went through probably 4 or 5 or 6 different Bootstrap guides that are out there on the internet to follow, and they all would invariably break down for one reason or another. Um, my favorite one was if you search for Rails 7 and Bootstrap, there's a blog that says install it without needing Node.js because this person didn't want a whole lot of like extra packages and dependencies, which I absolutely appreciate, by the way. Um, I think NPM and Node.js get a little bit too crazy with dependencies, personal opinion. But the funny part of that was that the blog said, okay, first thing you do is don't install Node.js, and that's great up until you actually need Node.js to compile everything, because otherwise it's not going to work. Anyway, this blog is this is pretty useful. Basically, we're going to need Ruby, we're going to need Bundle, we're going to need NPM, and we're going to need Yarn. You're going to need the newer-ish versions of NPM and Node and Yarn as well. Otherwise, that can get you into a weird place. Also, you need Yarn installed before you do anything in here because otherwise your Ruby application seems to get into a really weird state. Like when I first did this one and I ran through and I got it working, I installed the Rails blog and then I installed Yarn and I could never seem to make it work after that. Like there's this, even when I installed all the packages, it just was in this bizarre state. Anyway, this is what I will be following. I will also add the notes that I have along the way in the description, but let's go ahead and get going. So I have Rails already installed, right? So this is my Rails instance. And what we're going to basically do is create a new and improved Rails blog. So let me get set with all my 30 windows that I have off screen. I'm going to need this link here, and we're going to have our default Apache page. That's great. It's going to run in :8080, which doesn't exist yet, which is fine. So first things first, I'm not going to go through. I'll put a link in the description as well for how Yarn can be installed on Ubuntu along with NVM, which makes Node and NPM a little easier to install. But basically, I've got Yarn up to date, so we can actually see NVM-v, NPM-v, Yarn-v, Node, JS-v. I've got 10.19, Node-v, 17. Okay, so here's all my various version numbers. You don't have to match them exactly as long as they're the most up to date rather than Ubuntu 20 installs like an older version of Node.js. So we need to get that up to date. Anyway, let's get going here first. So I've got an app that's already existing just as kind of a example. So let me show you where we're getting to, I guess. Bin Rails server-b, get off of our local host and then our port. So this should run, get our development server, and it's going to look something like this. And then we're going to add another link. Here's our beautiful jQuery popover. All right, so life is good there. Now, let's stop this. Just wanted to show you it, like the final it working before we get there. All right, so first things first, we need a new isolated Rails 7 app. So this is part of the guide. I'm going to do this a little bit differently here, right? So basically, their approach is to create the directory, create a bundle file, install that bundle, and then do it from basically the bundle. I'm going to do it with the way that we have been going so far in class. They both work pretty much the same, except I'm not enforcing 700. I'm enforcing the version of Ruby and Rails that I have on my server. So what we've got to do here is Rails new, and I'm going to call this 658 app. And then, sorry, I've been talking all day today. Force, and we are going to say CSS equals bootstrap. Now, this last bit is the thing that's new to Rails 7. Without getting into all like the packages and dependencies that implies. This is a new flag for us here. Okay, so new Rails app, go. Haha, I'm in the wrong directory. Back out one. Rerun it. Rails apps don't start with numbers. CIS658 app. Okay, I should have known that. Every good programming language ever doesn't let you start a variable name with numbers. Why would Bootstrap and why would Rails? Okay, so this will build. We see a few extra things happening here to our normal app. So we see these yarn run commands happening. So this is basically initializing your Rails application to handle Bootstrap. And it's adding a bunch of dependencies for us. We will see a package.json file pop up, which if you're a Node user, should be very familiar. And one other thing I'll talk about here in a moment. So let me clear ls. So I need to go into CIS658 app, and we see that we actually have package.json, a yarn.lock, and our Gemfile. Hopefully you remember that's our modules for this particular application. But this package.json is new. And if we look inside of it, we're going to see some dependencies. So we're bringing in a few packages. So we're getting Hotwired, Popper, Bootstrap, ESBuild, and SAS, SASS. And we're going to get a yarn build and a yarn build :CSS command. Now, one of the things to take away when you change your application.js file in a little bit, you need to run yarn build to make the changes reflect in your application. If you update your styles, you need to run yarn build :CSS. Otherwise, it will not make the change happen. And that brings up a new point. I'm not going to be going over SASS or SCSS, at least for the foreseeable future. If something changes, I might. But this is effectively compiling our style sheets. Now, SCSS is a very popular way currently for changing how CSS is written. It's a little bit more programmatic. It's a different way to write them. If you know how to write CSS already, you will probably feel relatively comfortable in it. But just kind of take note that it's not pure CSS. It's a little bit different. And we'll look at this in a moment here. So other things we do, so we now have our application here. We saw some errors when it was doing the initial install. So what I'm going to run is bundle install. Okay. And we see here's all of our packages that are installed. I recalled there was like an error missing dependency, so I'm just making sure that it gets installed. If you made a change to that gem file, it would be bundle update, and it would pull in all the new things. So basically, we're going to get the same output there. Okay. So first things first, let's make sure this app works. So I'm going to run it. So here's my server. Hopefully you're aware you can just hit up and down to go through your history and your command list. So same port, a refresh, should see this. That's good, just to show you that it's working. I go to the home and we don't have a route because we haven't defined it yet. All right, so steps now are pretty similar to what we did before. Make sure that I'm not hiding my code in my video here. All right, so And I guess I'm going to talk through this guide as well. So there's this line, open the gem file, replace this with this. I'm not going to do that. It's fine. I'm going to skip the database creation as well because we're not going to do anything database oriented in this demo. Is Bootstrap already installed? Yes, we looked at this already. And then you can actually dig a little bit deeper. So there is um, a few files here which basically are showing you that, yes, Bootstrap's being imported and installed. So where we are now, so we installed the new app. Okay, we told it to use Bootstrap. We updated all the dependencies, made sure they were all installed, skipped over the check to make sure that works because it works, or at least I know that it works. I would recommend you take a look at these honestly. All right, so look at these files. So we see some information that's injected into our basic HTML pages for including JavaScript and Bootstrap and things like that. So what we're going to do now is create a new route, a new controller, new view, and we're going to include Bootstrap in that. I'm going to skip over some of these. So I'm going to create our routes like we normally would. I'm going to create our controller like we normally would. And I'm going to update the view for that controller with the Bootstrap code. So again, deviating a little bit from the guide here. So let's go ahead and bring that up. Now I want to first update my route. So config routes.rb, and I'm going to say get /home to home pound index. So this should be very familiar for you from the Hello World application. So when I pass in /home, go to the home controller and it's indexed routes. Okay, so that's my config.rb. Now I want to generate a controller. So bin gin, what I've got on my mind now, bin/rails, and I'm just going to use G. It's generate for short, but controller, or call this home, index, and skip routes. So again, this is the same thing. I'm just G instead of generate, controller, home, index, skip routes. Same as before. We're going to get our controller here. We're going to get a view. We're going to get a route. If we look at our controllers, home controller, get something that looks kind of like this. It's just going to look for the default index page. Again, I'm not going to add in a bunch of extra routes here. We just want one of them. But it exists. I just wanted to show you that it exists, I guess. Okay, so we have that. We also have our default view now. If I were to run this, no, I don't want to regenerate that. I want to run my server. Okay. It's running. Go to /home. We get a page that looks like this. Oh, you know what? I made an update off screen. Let me get rid of this here. Because what I did, views, layouts, application, I added in this h1 hi there in the application, so the main page that everything inherits from. Just leave it in there for fun. But now what we have to do is back to our guide. We want to add in this content here. So what this is going to do, it's going to add a header tag, it's going to add a button, and we want it to have this pop over behavior. Now, this is a Bootstrap thing. Basically, when I click the button, I'm going to get a little pop-up happen, and that pop-up content will be populated by this data BS content attribute. It's not going to work right now, as a heads up. But let's go to our view. So vim app, views, home, index. So here's my index page. I'm going to add in their content here. Okay, so header tag, welcome this to home page. Here's my button. It's beautiful. Let's run our application now. It's making sure I didn't forget something. Okay, it's running. Refresh. Okay, that hi there is still there. It's kind of a nice little demonstration of breaking our page apart into templates. Like I've got this header that would exist on every single page because I added it to my base application view. But here's my welcome. This is the home page. Here's my button. I'm clicking it. It's doing nothing. as expected because I haven't fixed it yet. So that's good. Now we have to, okay, so we're going to skip over this. They're running /bin/dev. That's intended for you to run this on your own computer. The way we're running it is fine for our servers. Okay, so now we actually have to add in the behavior. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in this code here, and this is actually from the Bootstrap guide, so this is like nothing special, but we're adding some JavaScript code to basically say anytime this particular button class is clicked, add in the content for that into a quote unquote popover, which is part of Bootstrap here. So these lines of code here should already exist in this file, and this is what we're adding in. So this is an app JavaScript application.js. So app application app JavaScript application. All right, so here's my 3 lines. Again, these are injected when we said Rails is using Bootstrap. Let's copy and paste in these commands here. So pop over trigger list. Basically, we're going to go through everything. Anytime we see this data BS toggle, we're going to say, do the popover behavior, which again, is part of Bootstrap. So, I feel like I'm getting an error here. Oh, that's just my highlight color. Okay, so I'm going to save and close. Now, I'm going to show you this not working intentionally right now. So I changed my JavaScript code. I reload my browser, and I click the big red button. Reload. Click. Didn't work. Yes. Reason why is that the way we are running this server is not rebuilding the application for us. I'm going to guess when you run it locally with bin/dev, it's going to automatically rebuild everything, rebuild the JS files, rebuild the CSS files, and it's all going to magically happen. When we're running it in the mode that we are, that doesn't happen for us. So what we have to do is cancel this. We need to run yarn build. Okay. And what this is going to do is it's going to take a look at our application, make some updates, and now when we run it, we refresh, and I click, there's my popover. So we see amazing content, right? Popover title. And if we were to, oops, that's the wrong one. We want to look at the view. So here's my title, here's my content. We could change this title for CIS658. Let's make this a little bit more manic, as you do. And now, because I changed that JavaScript file, I do need to rebuild it again. Let's run our server, refresh. Here's my title, here's my manic content. There we go. It's delightful. So, point here, if you update JavaScript, make sure you rebuild yarn. If you are not seeing changes, that's probably why. Okay, last thing that we're going to do here, and this is basically the rest of the guide, let's add in some custom SCSS. Now, we're actually going to look at this SCSS sheet. So let's close this off, and vim app assets style sheets. So app assets style sheets. And then this application.bootstrap.scss. Now, let's take a quick look here. Actually, never mind. All right, so app, assets, style sheets, application. So we're going to add in a line here for defining the font size. So this is $, I'm just going to paste it. Get rid of this line was added bit here. We're saying our header is 1 rem. So this is basically a relative em, which is just a size. Okay, we're going to see the font size for H1 get smaller. Now, this doesn't look exactly like a CSS command, right? This is an SCSS command. This is going to get compiled down. Okay. Let's close and reopen that. I did something to make Google angry. I clicked and dragged something, and I'm not really sure where my text disappeared to. Good, it's back. All right, CIS658 up. We're in app, assets, style sheets, that one. Okay, so basically this line of code here is we'll take a look at the CSS once it builds out. But we changed the SCSS style sheet. This is something that needs to be built. So we're going to run yarn build :CSS because that was one of the rules that we saw in our yarn file. And we see that it's going to build our SCSS code here. All right. And now when I run the server again, we're going to see that our headers got smaller. And if we actually look at the CSS rule, I want you to be responsive and not so tiny. Out of device mode. Okay, if I click on this element and I look at the H1 size, okay, it's just font size 1 rem. Okay, so this is the rule that's being compiled out. If we were to look at the actual style sheet, I gotta go to sources, assets, this one, H1. So we're going to see that this is basically what gets spit out by SCSS when we define it that way. Again, SCSS is not something we're really going to dip into in here, but it's one way that we can build CSS rules. Kind of an extra layer of abstraction. And hey, look at that. We also see some media queries in here. Neato. And if you're kind of curious, if we can, we want to make this 5 rems. Now it's a lot bigger. Again, the fun of playing with CSS in the browser. All right, let's make this 2 or 3 rems. 2, 1, 0. It's gone. And we refresh, it goes back to normal. Anyway, that is probably enough for this demo. So to kind of summarize, we're going to be using yarn anytime we need a change made in our JavaScript or CSS code. So don't forget to do those aspects. Again, I'll have all my little extra bits that I had to do in the description, and I hope you all have fun with Bootstrap. Bye, everybody.